But in reference to like the policing issue,
Uh-huh.
I think that from what I've seen, I've lived in, you know, all Black community in Baltimore. I've lived in white communities. I've lived in
Where's
diverse
Baltimore, by the way?
communities. Huh?
Where in Baltimore did you live?
Baltimore, well, Baltimore City. My grandparents and my parents grew up there. So I lived there for a short time. And
Right.
police behave differently when they come into a Black neighborhood and when they go into like, or a wealthy neighborhood as well. They
Well,
do
see,
they behave differently.
Well,
And
see,
I've
this is
seen
the
them
key
like
point, though.
harassed.
Like
Huh?
black and wealthy, right, is like a category problem, right? Because there are white areas where police act just like they do in Black areas.
That's true.
Right? Because the point is, and I mean, when you go out to those big empty geometrically shaped states out in the West where there are no Black people, white people play the role that Black people play, right? Because, and I'm not trying to diminish racism as a component of it, but the key question or the key focal point of this kind of policing is, as I said, suppressing populations that people who have property consider to be potential threats to their property, right? And even if you think about it that way, that even helps to broaden the coalition to fight for police reform, right?
But we already have police reform.
Well, no, we need better and more fundamental police reform, right? I mean, I don't mean bullshit like body cams, right? Which are always a double-edged sword anyway. No. I mean fundamental reorganization of the policing function and how it's understood, right? And I know that's what some people want to mean when they say defund the police, but the problem is that the slogan itself doesn't have specific content. So what's happened is that the right wing takes it and makes it seem like lawlessness is what the demand is, and we didn't have to give them that, right? You follow me?
Well, there was actually an initiative called 10 Demands, and Nick from RBN is one of the co-founders of that, and it lists all the demands with defunding the police. And I'll show it. I'll go ahead and share it with you really quick and show you. Because I think like I want more people to like know about this, like 10 demands, and they listed all 10 of them here that they had for defunding the police. Number one, I'll just read them off: defund the police and reallocate resources to impacted communities. Number two, demilitarize the police. Number three, eliminate discriminatory policing, prosecution, and sentencing. 4, institute complete law enforcement transparency and accountability. 5, independently investigate all police crimes and abuses of power. 6, install community representation, oversight, and safety measures. 7, end strategic counter-protest violence. 8, apologize and provide reparations. 9, end the war on drugs. And 10, end carceral punishment. And in reference to crime, I think if you want to fix crime, we need to fix the poverty issue.
Well, yeah, but see, I mean, here's the problem, Sabrina. That's certainly true, right? But in the meantime, what happens to people who feel like they're prey in these impacted poor communities? And well, I think the problem with the demands is like most of 2 through 9, almost all of 2 through 9 seem perfectly reasonable to me. But the problem is that one, I mean, the number one demand negates almost all of the rest of them, right? Like if you defund the police, well, if you defund the police and reallocate the money, well, then you've gotten rid of, then you've demilitarized the police because there's no police, right? But all the rest of the stuff presumes that there will be police, right? Right, all the training stuff, which I wholeheartedly support, and I mean the civilian input and stuff. But the first demand doesn't really do anything except give the right wing a flag. where I've had a red flag to swing. And they've been swinging it, right?
But police, and this is why I tell people though, but police don't really prevent crime though. Because do the police prevent the school shooting that just happened today?
No,
they don't. They don't prevent, and they only solve 0.02% of crimes. So if we were to legalize things like marijuana, like federally, if we legalize marijuana, or let's go really far out there, like Portugal did, and they decriminalized all drugs.
Yeah, which I think ought to happen too. Right.
All right, we're on board with that one.
Yeah,
so if we do
absolutely.
that, do we still need to give more funding to the police?
Well, see, but here's the thing. So, like, yeah, I mean, back when we were trying to get the Labor Party off the ground, right? I mean, there were a lot of really earnest progressives out there who wanted to get rid of a military spending and to get rid of the defense budget, right? And in fact, I'd worked in that movement for a while myself too. And at our convention, right, we had there's a guy, good guy, he wanted to introduce a resolution that would, well, I'll forget about that. I'll say this. One of the things that those people used to do, right, was they would focus on what they called conversion, right, and could show at a level of abstraction, right, that if you take all the military budget and convert it to peacetime uses, then all the jobs that would have been lost, right, because of getting rid of the military budget, would be replaced by jobs that were generated in the peacetime conversion industries, right? That sounded reasonable as hell at one level of abstraction. It was not in any way persuasive to people who held jobs working in the defense industry, because they knew that they were going to lose their jobs. And there's this thing the economists called transaction costs, right? That they were going to have to pay. It's the same thing with this proposal about ending poverty. And in the first place, no municipal police budget in this country, it would be large enough to make a dent on poverty in the city that the police operate in. But like, what happens in between? And what happens to the reality that not everybody who's in prison has been railroaded, and even some of the people who have been railroaded are dangerous criminals. Right? So what happens with that, right? I mean, there's a level at which people live where all this stuff has to be worked out to make sense. And I mean, the more abstract the slogan, and this is what we were talking about when I first came on, right? The more abstract the slogan, the less good it can do for us, and the harder it is for us to organize around it. And the easier it is for the other side to organize around it, because all they're doing is scapegoating anyway. That's all they want, right? So I don't know. I mean,
but we shouldn't have to. I feel like we shouldn't have to change who we are or what we want to make that side feel comfortable. Like that's kind of.
Well, that put it a different way, right? Because I'm not saying make the right wing feel comfortable. What we need to do is to inoculate people who ought to be with us, to insulate them from the scapegoating. And that's just politics. That's all that is, right? I mean, it's the difference between politics and taking a moral stand. And I don't really care about taking moral stands. I think that's what happens after you're defeated, right? Or after you've won, right? But that's not the way to win. But again, like I'm not calling for taking a half step back on principle, right? But Mao Zedong said, and it's not often I quote him, but that the point of politics is to unite the many to defeat. And that's something else I think that we've lost in how progressives think about politics, right? Because what we need to do is to find those points of commonality that are shared most broadly within the society, and organized on the basis of building solidarity around those commonalities, and then struggling on that base of solidarity to work out the points of difference, like the abortion issue, for instance, is one, right? Right. So, like, if we had a bunch, if we had 15 million people aligned in a movement for national health care, and then somebody, Trump or somebody tried to toss the abortion issue into the ranks. And by the way, what they talk about Hispanic women or about Hispanics being opposed to abortion. Like, Hispanic women get abortions at the same rate as other women. Catholic women get abortions at the same rate as other women, mm-hmm. right? And we ought to be able to take that issue off the political agenda. And the way that we can do it is by building an alliance around needs that people feel every day. And when some people's knees get kind of weak around a question like abortion or same-sex marriage, you can say to them, well, look, I'm not even trying to change the way that you feel about it, right? Because I'm not your priest, right? But what I'm asking you is, what's more important to you? That we win national health care, or that no woman can ever get an abortion, right? And yeah, I mean, some people would say, well, it's more important to me that no woman can ever get an abortion. I'd say, fine, well, see you later, right? But we've got to assume that between us, which would be in the case of this issue, the 80 to 90% of people in the country who do support access to abortion, and whatever percentage of those others we can get, we'll be able to win. But we can't get anything if we don't build that movement, right? And you started it out by pointing out that the Democrats basically don't ever offer us anything except bubblegum in hard times, and are always fresh out of bubblegum. So like, we need to build the alternative, right? But we have to build the alternative, right? It's not just a matter of saying, well, I believe this, therefore this is what we should do, right? The politics is around the movement building. And by the way, the civil rights movement and the CIO were the same thing, right? I mean, not everybody shared complete agendas, and there are a lot of assholes in that movement too.
I think I would like to see us build something like the March on Washington, with thousands and thousands of people with a list of demands on. So you mentioned economic issues and social mm-hmm. issues, right. With a list of demands. We're not going to vote for you if you don't do this, and this, like Medicare for all.
Right. But see, before the march comes the organizing around the issues, and it takes mm-hmm. a lot of political education. Your podcast, our podcast, others, right? But most importantly, face-to-face engagement with people, right? But the movement. So again, right? I mean, the March on Washington didn't just happen, right? Like, I'm A. Philip Randolph and Rustin and the Negro American Labor Council, like, were organizing in cities around the country for months. And there was already a thick web of activists and local movements, right, that existed. We don't have any of that now. Like, we have the activists, right? I mean, Langston Hughes was rumored to have said, I don't know if it's true, once that every Black person with a new suit and $5 in his pocket is a Negro leader. And we've got that kind of world now, right? Like, or as I sometimes put it, I mean, any fool with a computer or a phone and access to the internet can be a Negro leader, right? I mean, and it's like that out there, right? And the blogosphere and Twitter are like full of people now, but there's a difference between people making calls for stuff to happen and real social forces that have institutional capacity, right? Capacity to do stuff like stop a redevelopment project, for instance, right? And we haven't had the capacity to do that for years. I mean, I've been involved in a number of those too. And what happens is, by the time that we find out, that our side finds out, it's already too late to stop it, right? So the best you can do is try to negotiate the best possible terms of surrender. And on that point, I mean, by the way, like, a really great book, I think actually the best thing that's ever been done on the carceral state apparatus, is by my colleague, Marie Gottschalk, and it's a book called Caught. And it's a very careful examination of how this thing took shape, and moreover, how it's having taken shape has created its own dynamics of interest. So it's not just a matter of rolling back right to where we were. The private prison industry is itself a product of the growth of the carceral state. And once it comes into existence, it becomes another dynamic actor, right, in the process. But I would really recommend that to to all your viewers and the listeners, because if we do want to tackle this thing, we first of all have to have a much clearer sense of what it is and what it's about. And I'll say this: there's absolutely nothing that we can learn from slavery that will help us make sense of the circumstances that confront us right now.
I have one more question for you, Professor.
Oh, sure.
Reed.
Yeah.
How do you feel about a general strike?
You can't have a general strike unless you got the organization, right? I mean, what a general strike would be like somebody. Well, in fact, I remember several years ago, like a friend of mine was on a panel at the New School, and I watched a link, and like this was during Occupy, and a young guy from Occupy got up and made the announcement about the general strike that they had called, and he said, "So now it's not going to be like your traditional general strike where you're not expected to go to work." So I thought, well, what the fuck is it then if it's not that, right? Like a general, right? A strike is when you don't go to work. So. But it was just something that felt good, right, to say and to think about and to wish for. And like that's the kind of politics that's going to lead us into the concentration camps. Right.
What?
Yes, because it can't happen. Right. It can't happen. And if it could happen, making it happen would take all the steps I've been talking about the whole time that we've been talking, right? Because here's the most important point. The most important point is that as a left, we've got nothing. There's nothing, right? And it has to be generated. And wow, like if at some point, we had the political capacity to call a general strike, like in one city, even. I mean, that'd be great. But you got to roll back to what the requirements are for being able to do something like that, right? And the first thing you got to have is mass organization of workers. Well, we don't have that. So a general strike could be cool.
But what about the truckers? Look how the truckers like organized and shut things down.
Where in Canada, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first place, I mean, they were heavily funded by right-wing interests, right? There were no left-wing interests that would fund a strike for us, right? Because strike means that people don't get paid, right? And they can't pay their bills, right? And they get evicted, and they can't get their medicine, right? I mean, and yeah, I mean, like I said, like the truckers were. Yeah, I mean, they had a choke point, but there was a right-wing mobilization. That was also a lot of smoke and mirrors. So, but I'm telling you, like, there's just no shortcuts, right? There's no easy ways for us. Like, there's no way around it. Like, we got to do the organizing, and if we don't, we're dead. We might be dead anyway, but we're definitely dead if we don't do it.
I'm trying to get you away from the Democratic Party, Professor Reed.
Oh, I'm not in the Democratic Party.
Okay.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I registered as a Democrat, and when I vote, most often I will vote for Democrats because that's what you do when you vote. But that's not where the movement's going to come from, right? No, I mean, like, yeah, it's not where the movement's going to come from. So we've got to try to build it. And that's got nothing at all to do with the Democrats, actually.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Because I was thinking, like, I don't think we should do a movement through electoral politics.
Oh, no. Yeah. No, you and I are on the same page about that completely.
Well, Professor Reed, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great discussion.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks a lot for having me. And I hadn't seen your podcast before, but I'm really happy to know it now.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.